This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Brad Stone. In June of 2017, Lime launched its first fleet of pedal bikes. Now, less than 2 years later, the electronic bike and scooter company is celebrating over 50 million rides worldwide. Joining me to discuss is Lime Chief Operating Officer Joe Kraus. Joe, nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
It's hard to believe it's only been 2 years. Investors obviously continue to be very excited about the scooter business. I guess my question is, now that we've just come through a winter, and I would imagine that to some extent this business is seasonal, are riders still enthusiastic about micro-mobility, scooters and e-bikes?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, we just celebrating 50 million rides globally. One of the things that's interesting is it's only been 13 months since the company's offered scooters. We're in 85 different markets in 26 different countries. And the thing that amazes me is both how fast the growth of the business is, which is really a function of how useful the service is, but also how global it is. I think if you look at our business, Europe is an unbelievably great market. Those cities were built for horses and humans, and cars were always a retrofit. And so all across the world, and especially Europe, you see micromobility taking off.
I'm not sure North American cities were built for scooters. And I think we have that problem here in San Francisco, right? I mean, to what extent has the company had success working with cities to create kind of safe solutions, safe avenues for micromobility?
Yeah, so if you look, there are about 300 million trips a day in the United States in cities that are less than 1.5 miles of driving or over 0.5 mile of walking. That's the total addressable market. If you consider utilization of a vehicle of about 4 trips per vehicle per day, you need about 75 million scooters in the entire country to serve all of that need. Even if you take 10% of that, 7.5 million scooters, there's a limited amount of scooters that currently cities are allowing to be deployed, and we're just working with every city to try to get more and more scooters available in their city, because everywhere we go, we see an incredible adoption of that vehicle type. And the primary reason is, one, it's the closest thing to a magic carpet the world's ever seen. You get on and you glide. Second is time savings. So I commute every day from the Caltrain station in San Francisco to my office, 20 minutes in a car, 7 minutes in a scooter. That's 3 days of my life I get back every single year through using it. And what we're working with in cities is how do you make it safer, protected bike lanes, and separating high-speed traffic from low-speed traffic, and we're working with many cities across the country to make that happen.
You guys have been prolific fundraisers at Lime, as have some of your competitors. You've raised over $700 million. You know, we just reported that Uber is ready to price its IPO between $44 and $50. They could be valued at as much as $90 billion. You know, to what extent is a successful Uber IPO important for Lime?
I think it's important. Full disclosure, through my prior job, I have exposure at Google Ventures. I have some exposure to Uber shares, so just for full disclosure. But I think it's really important, mainly because I think there's a revolution happening, which is what I would call the great unbundling of the car. The model for the last 100 years has been you own a car and you do everything with it. Short and long trips, trips in a city, trips out of the city. But that's changing. It's changing because the internet and smartphones in your pocket allow you to summon a vehicle. It's what Uber taught us. Summon a vehicle when you want it without having to own the vehicle. Well, the next step is happening too, which is instead of using a car for everything, you can use small vehicles for short trips and bigger vehicles for longer trips. And so this unbundling of the car, be it access over ownership or being it small vehicles for short trips, bigger vehicles for larger trips, is happening. And I think the Uber IPO is just another proof point in this mega trend across the world. I
would imagine you had some exposure to Uber's financials since you were an investor, but is there anything specific that you took away from Uber or Lyft's S1?
Well, I think one is, at least as it relates to Lime, the investment of both companies in micromobility and the importance that both of those companies put on the idea of using smaller vehicles for short trips, both to the benefit of the economics of the business, but also because there's a tremendous time savings, and so there's customer demand. Though that was one of the things that stood out to me.
But that means they're competitors, and of course Uber acquired one of your rivals, Jump Bikes. How serious do you take the fact that they're now coming, you know, quite deliberately coming into your market and with new capitalization?
Well, we have a great partnership with Uber. Like in any early market, the definition between a competitor and a partner ends up being a little bit fluid. So I think things are going to evolve over the next couple of years. So we have a deal with Uber where we're integrated into the app. Where Lime scooters appear in that app. And at the same time, of course, they offer their own fleet through Jump. I'm not particularly worried about it because right now 99% of people have never ridden any scooter of any kind, and so most of the market is ahead of us, so I'm not terribly worried.
Do you anticipate consolidation in this business, and how soon will it happen?
It's a capital-intensive business. I mean, you mentioned how much money we've raised. We're really focused on excellence of operations, which allows for really positive unit economics. And this is a complicated business. We have a supply chain in China that then builds bespoke scooters and sends them to these 85 markets across the world in these 26 countries, and then they operated by local teams. It's a complicated operational business, and getting it right and making positive margin is hard. So what do I expect to happen? Right now, there's some big competitors and a bunch of smaller companies. I do expect, because it's a capital-intensive business, that scale players are going to win. And I think that many of these smaller players are going to struggle to raise capital later in the year and early in 2020. I don't know whether that's consolidation necessarily, but I think scale matters in the business.
And how big is the geographic opportunity? So you talked about Europe, and obviously you started in the US. What countries are you investing in right now?
I think if you look, we are on 5 continents. So we're investing pretty much globally across the world. For example, just a couple of days ago, we launched Bogota, Colombia, and Montevideo in Uruguay. So we have a wide geographic footprint from Australia, New Zealand, in through Latin America, both Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Tel Aviv. We're just all over the world.
Is there anywhere where it doesn't work?
I think there are some markets. I would point to Southeast Asia. I would point to China, for example, right now where it's actually illegal. These scooters are illegal because they're classified as cars. I think India would be tough. There's some markets where...
I don't think you want to ride a scooter on a road in India.
Well, yes, exactly.
Could get dangerous.
You have a combination of willingness to pay, infrastructure, ability to move vehicles around. So there's some markets where I think mostly concentrated in Southeast Asia that are going to be harder to operate.
The last question, and quickly, safety. Obviously there have been lawsuits from Lime riders who have been injured, lawsuits from riders riding scooters from other companies. How do you improve the safety and make sure that people are operating the scooters and the e-bikes responsibly?
So our goal is to make a scooter safer than a bike. We do a ton of things in this regard. Obviously, one of the things you can do is give away lots of helmets, and we have over 250,000 helmets that we've given away. But the second is, this is a new vehicle type. So rider education on how you ride them, rider education on where you ride them. And then lastly, working with cities all across the United States have a program called Vision Zero. They want 0 pedestrian fatalities, and a big part of that is protected bike lanes and separating cars from pedestrians and bikers, and we're working with cities to develop more of those.